We are going to continue this week with a lecture about the major challenges encountered when using a data warehouse. Some of these challenges fall into the design side of the house, and the rest deal with the actual use of the warehouse's capabilities. There are certainly many challenges when we undertake any major project, but consider this. If you already have several databases full of data and you decide you want a data warehouse, the implications of getting everything correct are huge. Planning for building a data warehouse before you ever collect any data may sound like an easier route to take, but it probably wouldn't be cost effective to have a huge suite of systems laying around waiting to be filled up and utilized. Unless you already have billions of dollars of capital, it isn't practical to create a data warehouse until you actually have a legitimate need for it. So many people in the industry have created their own lists about what they think are the most important challenges in this arena, and there is a lot of crossover within their ideas. The next few slides will cover the challenges that everyone seems to agree on. We'll start with data quality. The data that ends up in a data warehouse typically comes from many different sources, and all of that data is not necessarily stored in the same format. So it can be difficult to compare the different data types and merge them into a different construct. This challenge often causes us to end up with duplicate data, conflicting data, inconsistencies, and even some missing variables. When we have a poor quality of data, we cannot fully rely on the analysis of that data or on the reports that are generated. A major reason why this happens is because the systems providing the source data are much older and are managed by different teams of people, all of whom have customized their systems to work for their department's needs. Of course, it makes sense for them to perform those customizations to make their individual operations run more efficiently, but when every department is different, the source data cannot be easily compared, and similar data may actually end up in the wrong place after being sent to the warehouse. We also have the problem of data coming from flat files, like spreadsheets, that do not have the same structure as a database, and we are almost guaranteed to run into duplication or redundancy with these sources. Performance is another common challenge encountered with data warehousing. To use an analogy, if you are designing an airplane, you will need to carefully design each element from the start to make sure it meets the intended purpose. But there are many different types of airplanes, so we also have to consider the needs of the people who will use the airplane. A private jet will have different performance requirements than a commercial airliner, and a military jet will have even more different performance requirements. Each user, each buyer, each one of these airplanes must consider their individual performance needs before making the purchase. In some cases, they tell the manufacturer those needs, and the manufacturer builds it to their specifications. A data warehouse needs to be designed from the same perspective. Every organization that uses a data warehouse is going to have slightly different needs, even though the same basic need is there. We must consider the speed at which data needs to be analyzed, how often reports will be generated, the amount of data that will be stored, and the number of users who will be accessing the system. So the performance goals need to be determined ahead of time, and the challenge of achieving those goals will require some tuning during the installation and likely for the first few months of use. Cost is also one of those variables that will determine how the other variables turn out. Some companies try to create their own data warehouse in-house in an attempt to save money, while others hire an outside party to do the work. Regardless of the chosen path, the cost is always a challenge that needs to be overcome. I mentioned the size of large data warehouses in earlier lectures, and some of them are incredibly expensive, not only to build, but also to maintain. It seems that the best route to take is to develop a plan for all needs and performance requirements, and then see if the required costs are within budget. If not, changes will need to be made to make it fit within the budget. This is where the challenging part comes in. eliminating capabilities will directly affect the needed performance, so some sacrifices will need to be made. Of course, the other side of the coin is to wait until the proper budget is available to create a warehouse capable of meeting all performance needs. Renting space on another organization's system or using a service like what Amazon offers is also a possibility. So it is easy to see why this is a common challenge in these applications and why it will need to be overcome in order to move forward. Another area that can affect several others and can be challenging to navigate is the complexity of design. These data warehouses aren't simply slapped together with a little bit of code and then thrown into production. All of the requirements, all of the desired performance metrics, and all of the requested management functions create a very complex system. Think about the algorithms that need to be created to analyze specific pieces of data, or the coding required to give detailed charts plotted on maps or geographical displays. These are not easy elements to program. It's common for people to think that listing out needs during the design process is a waste of time. There is usually some form of high-level idea of what they want out of the system, but they don't always formulate the details. These details are necessary if the system is ever to perform in the needed way. If we fail to recognize the complexity of these systems, we will fail to provide the necessary information that makes them function properly according to our specifications, and we will end up with a faulty product that does not deliver the needed results. To use the earlier airplane analogy, we would end up with an airplane that doesn't fly. Explaining this challenge to the decision makers will help to alleviate it, and it will undoubtedly eliminate a few headaches as well. People don't like change. We often resist change as much as possible. So when a new system is put into place and everyone is required to use it, it creates a challenge known as user acceptance. Convincing users to change daily routines is always a difficult task, and implementing a data warehouse will definitely require some users to change some of their daily tasks. This will not affect all users. As we have already discussed, the end users don't typically have any access to or direct use of a data warehouse. But data administrators and analysts will certainly have to focus at least some of their attention on these new systems. This is another one of those challenges that can be headed off even before design begins by showing these users the importance of bringing a data warehouse into the mix, training them on how to use the software, and getting their input on how it should be used. User acceptance always goes better when the users feel like they have a role to play in the development process. We tend to resist change when it is thrust upon us, but we are more welcoming to it when we get to participate in the plan of how it will come about. Vendors always think their product is the best solution. Allow a vendor to give a presentation on their product, and they will certainly do everything they can to convince you that their solution can meet every one of your needs. Naturally, they are in the business of making money, and the only way they can do this is to sell what they have to offer. The reality is that many of the vendors who work in this space do have great solutions, and if we could pick and choose just a few pieces from each one, we may be able to find the perfect solution, but that is not really an option. Organizations have to weigh how they can use one vendor's product to fulfill their needs, but when a vendor does provide a presentation, they will naturally promote their product over their competitors, even if their product is not necessarily the best solution. So the challenge here is to do enough research to determine which product really is the best for your own needs. It will also be wise to find a product that has some abilities to make customizations which can then help to meet the needs it would normally not be able to do. Now, it's important to remember that every project has major challenges, and the best way to overcome those challenges is to plan it all out before the work ever starts. Even great planning won't eliminate all problems, but it will help to significantly reduce the problems and to smooth out some of the rough edges early on. Each of the challenges discussed this week will almost certainly pop up in every data warehouse implementation at some point. And there could be other industry-specific complications that others will also experience. From ensuring data quality, to ensuring reliable analysis, finding the perfect level of performance to keeping costs within budget, understanding the design complexity of these systems to getting users involved in the change process, and selecting the right vendor for the job. Each challenge must be overcome. As with anything else, planning will help to make it successful, and once the warehouse is up and running, users will eventually adapt to the new systems and software. Challenges are not necessarily bad. They actually help us fully think through a problem until it is resolved. Next week, we will shift more into the management side of data warehouses, and you will see where some of these challenges actually manifest themselves in day-to-day operations.